Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I've got some Dogman and I've got some terrifying Reptilian encounters to share with you. Before we get into these encounters, though, a couple links I'd like to share. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Now, the links to those books are in the description below. Now, guys, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's terrifying upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter brings us to the Bridgewater Triangle. A little bit of backstory. A couple yards away from my house is woods behind somebody's house. This woods is not normal. I believe there are paranormal creatures lurking throughout there as well as spirits. Alright, here's my encounter. About a year ago, me and 3 of my friends were walking around in the other neighborhood that was across the woods. Me and 2 of my friends decided to leave, but our other friend stayed. We got to my house, but something just didn't feel right. We decided to go back and get him, and I stayed in the middle of the woods while my other friends went to where he was. I had a bad feeling. I heard a loud bang, and this lizard-like creature emerged from the bushes and started chasing after us, faster than an average human running on 2 legs. I looked back, but I didn't see it anymore, and that was the last time we ever saw it again. But that's not the last encounter we had there. Today's second encounter. I didn't find out about this kind of stuff until after I had my first experience with a ghost. I had a few things happen in my life that was debatable, but after seeing it, there was no justification I could come up with. So now I'm open to anything, even if it sounds ridiculous. This is a brief explanation of what my girlfriend said she saw. When it comes to the supernatural, a lot of people tend to explain things like mists, shadow people, or orbs, rarely anything like a monster in solid clarity. My girlfriend told me about her encounter of a monster she saw outside of her house while we were on a Skype call. This was the only thing she saw like this, tall, maybe 9 feet. Bipedal, smooth, scaly, dark skin. She could see the skylight reflecting off of the skin as if it was actually there. Legs with an extra joint below the knee, protruding the leg backwards and then forward, like a slightly sideways V shape. The head had black eyes, no visible ears or nose. The mouth was large, partially snout, with pursed lips. The entire body was proportional, with a lean, muscular figure. So as she stepped outside to have her cigarette, she had the strange feeling like something was not right. The power was out at her street, but there was still a good amount of light in the city. Denver's lights reflecting back and forth from the clouds and snow. She then heard a mechanical, static-like croaking sound, somewhat like a transformer blowing up. And then she turned to see that thing standing just outside of her small yard. On the city sidewalk, staring at her from a slight angle with its body partially facing a couple degrees from her direction. She was so scared she couldn't even move. And she never seemed afraid of most paranormal things. She had a knock on her door from her mom to come out and get her. So, yeah, if I can believe my girlfriend, knowing that she has no reason to lie, I can believe that there's some weird shit out there. Today's third part of the upload. These are my encounters with a creature known as the Dogman while living in Kentucky. They still haunt me to this day. I thought I'd share them with you. Encounter 1, I was 8 years old, living in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. It was the summer of 2012, and it was hot. One summer night I woke up at maybe 11:30, 12 o'clock, and I was sweating like hell, so I walked over to the window to crack it. That's when I saw something in the tree line by our stock pond. We own no animals other than a small terrier, but the previous owners were commercial farmers. I watched for about 5 minutes before it emerged, and when it did, I was horrified. It was a wolf-like creature, about 6 to 7 feet tall and partially covered in dark gray hair that shone in the light of the full moon. It walked out on 2 legs and then very quickly dropped onto 4 and ran the 100 or so yards to the stock pond in mere seconds. It drank for a while, then stood up on 2 legs again, and I got a really good look at it. This thing was horrible looking. The fur was all patchy, very skinny, and it looked like it was covered in some kind of injuries. Years later, when I saw the 3rd Harry Potter movie for the first time, I saw the werewolf that's almost exactly what it looked like. It then took off across the old cornfield and into the woods on the other side. I'd heard stories of the creature, but never really believed them until that night. I heard a week later, while out around town with my folks, that there had been an attack on a nearby farm, and 3 hogs, 1 horse, had been eaten and ripped to shreds. That was my first but not last encounter with the Dogman. My second encounter, I caught a glimpse of the things consistently ever since the first sighting, but never got another good look at one until the fall of 2015, a month before we moved to Maine. It was dusk, and I was outside with some of my friends playing with our Nerf guns, as young boys do. Those were the good days. Anyway, after a while, we got bored and started a fire. We told some dirty jokes and laughed for a while. But then we started hearing noises in the woods, and the laughter died. We all retreated to a woodshed and armed ourselves with axes, pitchforks, and, like before, returning to the fire. About 10 minutes later, something rustled in the woods about 20 yards behind us, but no one dared to look and see what the heck it was. Finally, my friend Jeremy turned around to look and scream. He let out. Could have brought down the barn roof. That's when we all turned around to see it. Except this one was much taller, I'd say 8.5 to 9 feet tall. It was pure muscle and gray hair. It was on all 4 sniffing around the barn, but when Jeremy screamed, the thing just looked at us, stood up on 2 legs, and snarled. That's when my dad came out of the house with his shotgun and screamed, "What in God's name is going on?" We all just pointed and screamed. Then he looked at it and yelled, "Go on, get!" and shot at it twice. It ran into the woods, yelping, as I think it may have been hit. And we all went inside and locked the door. My dad sat in his chair with a shotgun the whole night, and I swore I could hear scratching along the side of the house until daylight. Turns out when we went outside the next morning, there were claw marks all over the side of the house. After that, everything was quiet until we moved, and I've never seen anything like it since. Today's 4th part of the upload. This happened to me back in January of 2014. I was on a back road in northeast Arkansas. At the time, I was a newspaper delivery driver. I used to pick my papers up from the press, usually about 12:15 in the morning. It was a 45-minute drive to get to the start of my route. At the time, I was a cigarette smoker, so after I bagged up enough newspapers to sustain my route, I'd light up a cigarette and roll the window down. Being cold, I tried to keep it up as much as possible because back then my car didn't have a heater. There's a really long stretch of gravel road called Old Military Road near Harrisburg, Arkansas. On the left side of the road are mostly houses, and on the right side are fence posts and open pasture with barns, troughs for horses and cows. It's the middle of nowhere. There were no streetlights, even though some people had floodlights in their yard. So I'm driving along, my windows down, and smoking my cigarette. It's about 2:30 in the morning, and I began smelling a combination of burning hair and piss. Like, not a mixture of the two, but one would end, and then there'd be the other. It was definitely not a great smell. I tossed my cigarette and rolled my window up, but I could still smell that god-awful scent. The further I go down the road, the worse the smell gets. Usually, I'd see some cows sleeping outside or horses chilling. But nothing tonight, so I know that I'm not the only one that picked up on something being weird this night. As I'm coming up to a fork in the road, I take a left, and there's a big open field to the far right. I see what looks like a man with a deer's head. It was too dark for me to tell whether it was a man wearing a deer skull or actually a human-deer crossbreed, but it was definitely the source of whatever that smell was. It scared the shit out of me, and I didn't want to hang out long enough to figure out exactly what it was. My perception, it was at shoulder height, 7 feet tall. The head probably added another foot. I don't know, but this thing was massive. There were definitely deer antlers, and the smell was disgusting. I saw it stretch its arms. Imagine flexing your arms and chest by making a wide C with your arms. Its movement for 2 to 3 seconds, I saw it looked to be human. I found a new job by late January and started in February. Was not interested in ever going back out there. Creepy deer man, let's not ever meet again. Today's fifth part of the upload. This takes place from Breckenridge, Kentucky, back in 1966. When I was around 9, living in Breckenridge County, I had the most hair-raising experience of my life. One night, while fast asleep in my bed, I woke to a loud commotion outside of my bedroom window, as if something hit the side of the house. I sprang to the window and looked out, but I didn't see anything. So I ran to the living room and pulled back the curtains to the window of the front door and came face to face with the most strangest animal. I can only best describe it as a lizard man, although the only human thing about it was the fact that it stood on 2 legs and was about 5.5 to 6 feet tall. As you can imagine, we really startled each other. It quickly turned and ran for the creek next to my house, and I jumped back from the window. I then ran to the adjacent window to catch a glimpse of it run away on 2 legs toward the creek, which was about 75 yards from my house. I lost sight of it as it disappeared into the darkness. It was reptilian looking, with scales covering its body. I could definitely see that this creature had webbed feet and webbed hands. Its color was dark, brownish green. What I remember the most about its face were these huge rows of gills which flared out on both sides of its face. Its face was very hard looking, with little dark eyes, similar to a snake or a lizard. I can't recall a nose or lips, as the face-to-face encounter only lasted a couple of seconds. There was this ridge-like feature which started on its forehead and ran back over the top of its head, kind of peaked at the top. Our house was located on an acre where Sinking Creek meets Ohio River. Sinking Creek originates 15 miles upstream in Big Springs, Kentucky. An interesting fact is this creek is only a natural trout spring-fed creek in Kentucky. Just past the town of Sample, it disappears 12 miles underground, thus the name Sinking Creek. It then resurfaces in an area further upstream in an explosion of bubbling water. As far as I'm aware, nobody has ever dared to dive far enough down to determine the true origin. This creek is believed to connect to a vast underwater system which connects many caverns in western Kentucky, and most noted being the caverns of Mammoth Cave. Now, quick interjection, we all know that there have been numerous reportings of Dogman, Sasquatch, reptilians, just any kind of strange creatures going around this Mammoth Cave. Maybe that is a vortex of some sort where these things can enter into our dimension and go back to their own. Just some food for thought. Who knows? But, you know, it's theory, and that's what we ride on here, guys, is theory. Today's sixth encounter. My sister lived about 5 minutes away from me. Back then, she and I attended a monthly writers group meeting in Danbury. It started at 7 p.m. and ended whenever. It was loads of fun. I always drove because her family only had one car and we didn't want to leave her husband afoot with 4 kids. On the night in question, it was probably close to midnight when I dropped my sister off home. I came to a stop sign at the end of her road and stopped. As I was preparing to turn onto my road, a thing stepped out of the woods closest to me and started across the road. I sat there. I was petrified. I could feel my blood rushing to my ears. And when it was directly in my headlights, it turned its head to look at me. When it looked back at me, its eyes reflected in my headlights. It stood there for several seconds looking at me while I looked at it. Long enough for me to get a pretty good look at this thing. It was definitely not Homo sapien or a Sasquatch. I don't know what the hell it was. It was maybe 7 to 8 feet tall with grayish or greenish gray skin. No hair or fur, no clothes, bipedal by design like us. Its arms and legs were not quite disproportionately long, though it had pretty long torso. Its eyes were not large, and its head wasn't misshapen, like the descriptions of greys one might see on the television. It didn't have a humanoid flat face either. There was almost a definite snout. Not a huge snout, but enough to be noticeable. When it turned and walked away, I swear to God it had a friggin' tail. Not a wagging tail like a dog, or a tail like a monkey. This was a long, dragging alligator tail like a kangaroo uses for balance. As soon as it was gone, I beat the hell out of there. When I got home, I woke my husband up, told him, and he laughed at me and told me to stop staying out at night. My sister's the only person who believed me. But she's had experiences of her own, not with this creature, and I've never encountered it again either. And no one I've ever told has seen it, so maybe it was just passing through. This was before everyone had cell phones and camera phones were a thing, and we were pretty poor in those days, so I didn't even have a camera. Though, if I had access to any of those things, I don't know if I'd have the presence of mind to photograph it, or how it would have reacted to that. Anyway, at the beginning, I mentioned Signs. I saw the movie when it was released on DVD, or VHS, I can't remember if we had bought the newest tech yet. I saw it at my sister's house in the middle of the day, and when they showed the alien for the first time, I cried. It moved just like that thing I had saw that night. It lacked the tail and snout, but it was pretty close in other ways. She had to pause the movie until my panic attack subsided. I watched the rest of it from the safety of a blanket tent on the sofa. Yeah, I was 25, but primal fear knows no age. We finished the movie, but I've never seen it again, nor do I ever wish to. I'm not saying what I saw was a visitor from outer space. I'm pretty sure at this point it was probably what's referred to in some circles as a reptilian. I don't know. I'm not about to track it down and ask it. Today's 7th encounter. Thick trees surrounded the property where 7-year-old S. Costia met this strange dog. A dog with red glowing eyes, a dog that sometimes walked on 2 legs. Costia lived in Romulus, Michigan, in a farmhouse with his mother, his uncle, and his mother's boyfriend. They raised chickens and rabbits, with farm cats roaming the crumbling old barn on the small acreage. But it was the woods that separated the house from the nearby major road, the woods that kept the house and the family hidden, that marred Costia's childhood. Those woods harbored something dark. Reports from the Shadows blog. We had this really strange dog creature that would hang around the property, Costia said. I would say dog creature because this thing was far too big and intelligent to be a stray dog. The dog, as big as a Great Dane, seemed to have the upper part of a German Shepherd and the lower part of a Doberman Pinscher. However, its eyes are what haunt Kostya. It had a very pronounced red eyes. I'm not saying it was a werewolf or a dogman, but it was very werewolf-like. Everyone who lived in the house saw this creature. The dog would frequently stalk the edge of the woods on our property in the day, Kostya states. It seemed to have no fear. My uncle would yell at it or throw things toward it to try to scare it off, but it would simply rear up on its hind legs like a ram and charge at him for a short distance. The creature never reached my uncle or anyone else who lived in the house. However, it had reached other things on the farm. We would frequently find dead chickens or rabbits after thunderstorms. We knew it was the dog thing because it would leave huge paw prints in the mud and claw marks on the window ledges. The thing eventually turned its attention to our house. Sometimes we found the screens ripped from our screen doors and windows. It would never outright attack us, but it did seem enjoying taunting us and scaring us. The taunting quickly became dangerous when the dog spoke. One summer night, my mom had left the window open in my bedroom to cool my room off so I could sleep. She was on her way to the bathroom and went by my room and heard me talking to someone. Stopping outside my door, well past my bedtime, she thought I was playing. She opened the door and turned on the lights and saw this dog. When she opened the door, she saw me standing in my bed, and I apparently had wet my pajamas. I was talking toward the window. I wasn't screaming or freaking out, but it seemed to be transfixed and talking in a low voice toward the window. Kostya didn't notice his mother, nor did he notice the tungsten light that suddenly poured a yellow glow through the bedroom. His focus was on what was at the window. When she looked toward the window, the dog had its front hands pushed through the screen and was looking through the window at us and making a low growl. Its eyes glared red. My mom threw a beer bottle she carried into the beast's face. Startled, it backed away from the window. She slammed the window shut and closed the blinds. The dog thing's presence, however, it was not gone. My mom told me that for about a week or so after, that I acted very strange. Like the way a kid acted in the movie The Shining. I would say things like, "We don't want you here. Our ghosts are food," or "God thinks you're bad." The house cats would run terrified when I entered a room for the time of madness. That wasn't the only thing wrong. For some reason, I would take sewing needles or anything sharp I could find and prick my fingers till they would bleed, then finger paint all over the walls in blood. The house also had a very strong septic smell to it for a few days. Lights would burn out and pop and weird things would just happen. 2 weeks after the dog tried coaxing Costa out of the house, everything stopped. My uncle was out back working on his truck when he saw the dog at the edge of the woods, making its way toward the rabbit pen. At this point, he was tired of dealing with it and went to the house and grabbed his rifle. Apparently, he fired at it and hit it in the rear. The dog turned and ran to the woods. We didn't see it anymore after that, and everything cleared up. But that dog thing will forever be burned in my brain. I'll always recall those eyes. Costa, now 40, states you could see its eyes out in the woods sometimes at night. I have bad dreams about it still from time to time. Today's final part of the upload. I grew up in New Jersey. My parents owned a small lakeside cabin in Fayette, Maine. Fayette is very rural. The camp is somewhat isolated. The road we were on didn't even have a name other than FR 18, Fire Road 18. It was unpaved. The camp was about 50 feet from the lake, built into a hill. There was no basement, but it was built on stilts. The lake-facing side had a deck and was approximately 15 feet off the ground. It was about 2 feet off the ground at the other end. Every year we would go there on vacation for a few weeks in the summer. My encounter is from the year 1982. It was August and I was 6. We were staying for 3 weeks that year and it was a real hot summer. It was cooler than Jersey, but it was still damn hot. The incident in question occurred after we had been there for about a week. For some quick background, my father had severe sleep apnea at the time and had not yet had corrective surgery, so he snored very loudly. When we were at home in Jersey, you could hear him snoring from my parents' room 3 flights up. Because of this, I could sleep through anything short of a nuclear blast. Also, I would sleepwalk occasionally. It never happened at home, only at camp. Sometimes I'd wake up outside. I also would have reoccurring nightmares that I really didn't understand, but now I really think they were about a cult. The cabin was small, consisting of one bedroom that my parents slept in, another room that was the kitchen, living room / my bedroom, and a small half bath. My room was a double bed with a curtain around it. The day this happened was a beautiful and sunny day. We spent the day on the lake and I was exhausted when we got back. We had some friends over for dinner and I went to bed almost immediately after. Several hours later I was awoken by the cabin shaking violently and this high-pitched, rage-filled squealing. I could hear my mother in the other room asking my father what the hell was going on. My dad had no idea. They debated on going out and looking, but my mother pointed out that we had no idea what we were dealing with no weapons. I was paralyzed with fear, cowering on my bed. I didn't move. My parents remained quiet. After a few minutes, the squeals turned to grunts and howls, and the shaking stopped. I could hear light scratching coming from the floorboards under my bed. Where my bed was, the floorboards were at least 8 feet off the ground. We heard the thumping on the stairs out back, and my heart started to pound. I was terrified. The back door was flimsy, and I was afraid that it would come up the stairs. Thankfully, it didn't. I heard some cracking of twigs and rustling of leaves as whatever it was lumbered off into the woods. I ran into my parents' bedroom and ended up falling asleep on their bed. In the morning, we all went and looked under the cabin. Underneath where my parents slept, there were several long, deep scratches in the woods. The floorboards were made from thick hemlock. My mother surmised that my father's snoring had either attracted or enraged some sort of creature. So, in short, there was a growling, grunting, squealing, long-clawed animal that was at least 8 feet tall. I didn't have any realized encounters with this unknown creature again. I would hear odd noises at night, but don't have any kind of cojones to investigate. My guess is that the Dogman did not like your daddy snoring. Just kidding. But yeah, that's what I think. I think the Dogman was just, either it was attracted by the food, the noise, whatever, but it was definitely, in my eyes, a Dogman, just from the description, the claw marks, the eeriness of everything. So anyway, guys, this was just another bonus video to go along with today's earlier video. I hope you guys liked the earlier video, the interview from Maine, and now this 8 little encounter video to go with it. So with that, I'm going to bid y'all farewell until tomorrow, and have a great night, and let's try to be nice to each other, guys. Alright? Have a good one.